Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Zone by D'Antonio podcast. Um, it seems Michigan State has steadied the ship after a tough three-game stretch where they got blown out by Ohio State. They beat a tough team in Rutgers at home in overtime, and they lost to Michigan at home, which was embarrassing. But it looks like they've steadied the ship a bit against Indiana, a team that's above 500 in the conference. They're not a bad team. They beat Maryland the other night and against Illinois. So I was very frustrated with the game against Illinois, but I'm glad they were able to go out there and get a victory when it mattered the most on the road. And they've really struggled on the road this season. And they better stay the ship when it comes to the road, or they're going to lose some games coming down the stretch. But I feel like they've learned, and I think they are going to be just fine this season. So, I think they'll still be a very high seed in the tournament, and they'll still be vying for a Big Ten championship. There's no doubt about that. We'll just talk about the Indiana game a little bit. That was that was a very good performance coming back from those two losses, and really, it started with just guys running the floor. When guys are able to run the floor, it opens up everything. And, their half court sets have not been great. Against Indiana, they ran them a bit better. They got to Nick Ward in the post a bit more. Nick Ward is the catalyst for this offense. They got to get it to Nick Ward. And when they are able to do that, and Nick Ward's able to make plays, get guys open shots, and, it really helps them. So that was a good win over a good Indiana team. They did lose their player, but they did lose one of their best players, Juwan Morgan, early in the game. He went out, he rolled his ankle up, and he was out of the game. But even when he was in the game, they were able to still play well. And Indiana's got some good players. Josh Newkirk's a good player. Mick Roberts, another good player. Mick Swain comes off the bench for them. He's another good player for Indiana. Indiana's got some good players. And Michigan State just shut them down. Archie Miller, he's a pretty good coach. I'm sure he'll do a great job there at Indiana in the future. But let's move on to the game that we just saw the other night against Illinois. Let's go with a little bit of the stats. We'll start with Miles Bridges, who played 38 out of the 40 minutes, and he was just brilliant in this game. Miles Bridges, he went 11 for 13 from the field. He put up 31 points, and he got 2 blocks. He did turn it over 3 times, but that's okay for him. That's okay for him. He did get 8 rebounds and 1 offensive rebound. He was 7 for 7 from the line, 2 for 4 from deep. The only shots he missed today were 2 threes, so very good game for Miles Bridges. He was unbelievable. He was carrying them throughout the first half. And another guy who was impressive was Jaren Jackson. Jaren Jackson went 5 for 6 in the field. He had some thunderous dunks, and he's able to put the ball on the floor. This guy's going to be special, not just here at Michigan State. He'll be special at the next level. Whoever drafts him is going to get a great player. And he will go before Bridges because he just has more raw talent than Bridges. And he had 6 blocks. 6 blocks. He was 11 for 12 from the free throw line. What can't this guy do? We know he can shoot threes. He's a great defender, on-ball defender. And he's a great shot blocker. He's just a great player. Cassius Winston, he played 20 minutes. He went 2 for 4 from the field. He had 5 points and 8 turnovers. So, listen, those 8 turnovers, Illinois is like a Texas Tech team, and Brad Underwood preaches this get-after-you defense, and Illinois did a great job early. I remember early in the game, Michigan State had more turnovers than field goals, but not just that. I don't believe Illinois got their first rebound until about 10 minutes into the game. Michigan State dominated the glass. And It's insane. The game was just weird. It was a weird game. It was a weird game, and yeah, it was just it's unbelievable. What happens, but Illinois actually had more offensive rebounds than defensive rebounds in this game, so it was a weird game. I mean, you look at the Illinois. Kipper Nichols really went off. He's going to be good for them in the future. They have some pretty good players. Yeah, they have some pretty good players. Finke, he's all right. He can shoot the ball. Um, some other guys, Black is a good player, but boy, they defend you really well. And I thought Michigan State could have done a better job with the turnovers. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But hey, listen, a win's a win, especially on the road. You never know what's going to happen. You saw Michigan got blown out by Nebraska, a team Michigan State destroyed. So it just happens. It happens, and it was good to see that this team was able to bounce back and after those turnovers, and you could tell that this team is back to their form, even with those 25 turnovers. If they had 10 turnovers in this game, they would have won by 40 points. That did not happen. So let's continue. Yeah, again, turnovers. They had 25 turnovers versus the Illini. 15 of them were in the first half. That's the most turnovers in a game since 2007 against Arizona. And listen, turnovers. Turnovers cost them games. They cost them the game against Duke. They turned it over, I believe, 18 times against Duke, and they had that game won. And Grayson Allen just got hot. And you know what happens when Grayson Allen gets hot? But it's turnovers. I mean, this year, it's just been crazy. The past 2 years. Last year, they were a turnover machine. They were a turnover machine. This looked like last year's team, the team I saw against the Illini. They had 25 turnovers, 15 in the first half. I remember watching the game. I was just clapping every time they turned the ball over. My hands were sore. I mean, seriously, they turned the ball over on every other possession, it seemed like. And it was a weird thing. They shot, what did they shoot, 80% in the first half? They shot 80% from the field and just had a 7-point lead. It was a weird game. And listen, you can't do that against Purdue. You can't do that against Michigan. You can't do that against Ohio State. You can't do that. You can't do that against Rutgers. Okay, you might get away with it against Illinois. And Illinois is a good defensive team, but listen, the reason why Michigan State won this game was because they were able to dominate the glass, and they were getting easy backdoor lobs for dunks from Miles Bridges, Jaren Jackson, Kenny Goings, other guys, just wide open. And they were able to run in transition a bit. But listen, the turnovers, they're going to hurt you, and they need to take care of the ball like it's their baby. That's really what they need to work on. So the week ahead, Friday, they take on a shockingly bad Wisconsin team. And Wisconsin just got blown out by Iowa. I believe they lost by 20 points. That is the largest loss to Iowa they've had in 20 years. And they have an All-American at center and Ethan Happ and a lot of young players on the outside. Michigan State has a good chance to dominate the glass in this game. Even though Ethan Happ's a very good offensive player, he's not the best rebounder. And Jaren Jackson's definitely going to be on him the whole game. I feel like this one could get ugly in East Lansing. I feel like they could easily blow out Wisconsin. And Sunday at Maryland, Kevin Huerter is a really good player. He's one of the best shooters out there. And Maryland is a tale of two teams. They play very well at home, and they are a disaster on the road. You saw what they did against Indiana. They were not very good against Indiana. And if you want to make it to the tournament, you got to win games like that. Maryland was blown out by Ohio State, and they're blown out by Michigan State. So earlier in the season, it's not going to be a 30-point game. It's going to be a tight game. Yeah, Michigan State. I don't know what I'm going to say about this game because anything can happen. But Sure, I'll give the win to Michigan State because I think they have a good chance to win out. And next Tuesday against Penn State, Penn State's got a lot of athletes on their team, but the game is at home, so I feel like they'll take care of Penn State, and they'll move into. I believe they'll be 9-2 by by the time next Wednesday rolls around. I think they'll be 10 and they'll be 9-2 in conference play, which might only be good for third place, just based off all the other teams are doing right now. And these are the Big Ten standings right now. Ohio State with a half game lead over Purdue at 9-0. Purdue 8-0. Michigan State 6-2, coming in third place. A half game ahead of Michigan, who's 6-3. More like a quarter game because Michigan has the tiebreaker over Michigan State, so it's almost tied there. Indiana at fifth. Nebraska sixth. Maryland seventh. Go down the list. Some disappointing teams are at the bottom, like Iowa and Minnesota. Just disappointing so far. Penn State's even been disappointing a bit, and of course Wisconsin. And Wisconsin was coming in here with a lot of young talent. They lost almost their entire starting five except for Ethan Happ, but they have not been able to get the team going. And I know Greg Gard. There's been a lot of speculation about Greg Gard's job after this season. I think he's a good coach, but we'll see about that. Minnesota, they've lost some guys due to suspension and injury. We'll see what happens with them. And Northwestern, I don't know what's going on with Northwestern. Northwestern has the exact same team they had last year, and they're just not the same, and I don't really know why. They are a fringe tournament team to me. I know they've lost some games. If they can go deep in the Big Ten tournament, I think they'll be in. So let's move on to my projected standings. That's right. I have Purdue going 17-1 in the Big Ten, and this really shows how mediocre I believe the Big Ten is this year. What do I think Purdue's only loss will be? I think Purdue's only loss will be in East Lansing. That will be their only loss this season. I think they'll get a 1 seed. I can't penalize them for losing one game at Michigan State and going 17-1 in conference. Ohio State will finish second, 16-2. They will lose to Purdue, and I think they'll lose at Michigan late in the season. How crazy it is, I do think Michigan will hold on to beat Ohio State this time and not blow a lead. I think Ohio State, once again, a product of the weak conference, they'll go 16-2 in conference. Michigan State also 16-2, but Ohio State has a tiebreaker over them. So, and I think I was tempted to put 2 1 seeds in the Big Ten, but the Big Ten isn't good enough to put 2 1 seeds. Either going to be a 1 seed or a 2 seed. And Michigan State, you finish third in your conference, you're not getting a 1 seed. So that's what it's going to be for Michigan State. I think they'll win out. Tough game against Purdue. That's definitely their toughest game. They have a lot of mediocre opponents, including at Iowa and at Minnesota, some just, fringe teams. And then we go to Michigan. I think they'll be a 5 seed with the win over Ohio State. I think that's fair. Could go up or down. This is just what I think may happen. I'm not entirely sure. And then 5, 6, 7, 9-9 for Nebraska, Maryland, and Northwestern. And I think one of these 3 teams will get into the tournament, which would make 5 Big Ten teams get in. And it matters, I think, who goes deepest into the tournament. Will it be Maryland? Will Nebraska have a good tournament? Will Northwestern get their magic going? But listen, we might only get 4 Big Ten teams in this year. And I just think it's a very mediocre conference. Very, very mediocre conference. There are conferences that are way better than the Big Ten right now. Then Indiana 8-10, Wisconsin and Minnesota tied at 7-11. Penn State 6-10, Iowa 4-14, as well as Rutgers at 4-14, and Illinois. Illinois is the best 0-8 team in college basketball in their conference, but They are still a young team, and they don't really have the size of the athletes to do much more than 2 wins in conference. So that is going to be it for the Zone by D'Antonio podcast. Everybody, thank you for watching, and I will see you later.